Hi, Tony.
Hi, Sheila. Hi.
In your sessions, you talked about change, you talked about self-awareness, and you said that if you change begins when you're conscious. So what do you think we should specifically do as educators to help our students become conscious?
Yeah, I think I used the word emergence rather than change.
Yes.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want to change another person at all, because people are where they need to be, and they have used their intelligence and creativity to be exactly where they need to be right now. But most people are hidden, and they created defences and walls of defences which they hide behind. And for them to emerge from behind those walls, to bring out what they've hidden about themselves, what they need are bridges.
Yes,
right?
We need to build bridges.
We need to build bridges. And the way we build bridges is through relationship. But the nature of the relationship needs to be very different to the relationship that led to them building walls. And the relationship needs to be unconditional. It needs to be empathic. It needs to be compassionate. It needs to be understanding that every human behaviour makes sense, and that when a person is troubled or troubling, they are trying to draw attention to hidden issues that was too fearful for them to talk about through their mouth, so they talk about it through their troubled behaviours, and sometimes through illness and through various manifestations in their bodies, like tics or nail biting or rashes or whatever.
So what can we do as educators to show them our appreciation?
I suppose the important thing is building. Each student has a different teacher, and it's very important that the teacher appreciates that, and appreciates that if I have 20 students in my class, I have 20 individuals. And do I find a way to individualize each student? And it's like, I was giving a lecture recently to business people, and I got an email from some of them afterwards, and they said to me, I felt I was the only person in the room when you were speaking today, right? And that's what I mean by individualizing. I was individualizing each person in that room by eye contact, through knowing their first names, through introducing myself to them when they came in, and remembering their names, and then, listening when they talked totally to them, that I wasn't distracted away from them. So very much individualizing their presence.
I understand. I'll try to do it myself.
Good.
So attendance is a big issue, is a big problem for us, because some of our students don't even show up from the very first day.
Yeah.
And we send them emails to encourage them to come to school, but they don't show up. So how do you think we can address this problem?
Well, I mean, if they're not attending class, I'm wondering what the deeper issues that need attending, right? Because somehow is it that they've always been attended to by others or spoiled or whatever, and that they haven't learned how to attend to themselves and attend to their own lives. Now, that's a guess on my part. Only the young person can tell me exactly how is it they're not attending class. And I need to have a one-to-one with them. And I need to just, in a very non-judgmental, compassionate way and patient way, right? I don't want to pose any threat to the young person that they're going to be judged or criticized, because they won't open up to me if they get any sense of that. But I certainly would want to sit with them and say, I really missed you in class. I'm wondering what's happening.
Sometimes while we think that we are building bridges, we actually build walls.
Okay.
When do you think we do it?
Well,
As an observant?
Yeah, I mean, when we build, we have wonderful illusions, haven't we?
Yes.
And I was saying that in the talk today, wasn't it, that illusion, right?
Yes.
There's an illness going on,
Yes.
right, when we build illusions. And when we have the illusion that we're actually creating bridges with young people, we're creating walls, then we're in a defensive place ourselves. And who now holds the bridge for us to examine that illusion and to come out from behind the wall of that illusion? And if students need holding, so do teachers. And who creates that bridge for a teacher? Because we all carry baggage. There's none of us who don't have fears. I was saying that the fear dominates most people's lives.
Yeah.
And we learn our fears at a very early age. And the more fearful we are, the more defenseless we are. But when we find safety, we are now willing then to talk about those hidden fears that we don't talk about. When we're with others, we put on a mask, we put on a face, don't we? We pretend, we create the illusion, oh, I have no problems.
Yeah.
But every person has some fears.
Yeah, you're right. In your book, Whose Life Are You Living? You talk about adopting the first false persona. How can we quit that? How can we stop adopting the false persona?
So I wouldn't want you to stop doing it because, and I'd use the word shadow self rather than false persona, because the word false suggests there's something wrong with it, right? We create a shadow in order to hide. We create a mask in order to hide behind the truth of who we are. Because when we presented the truth of who we are spontaneously as infants and as toddlers, somehow our worth and individuality and intelligence and creativity or radiance was not reflected for us. And once it wasn't reflected, we cleverly began to hide it. And the hiding becomes the mask, what I call the shadow self. But behind the shadow self is the real self. And the only way the real self is going to begin to emerge is, again, through relationship, but a relationship that creates the safety for the young person to emerge. If it's not safe, the person will stay hidden behind the mask, the shadow self. And that shadow self has helped him to survive up to this point. This is a creation. This is not a condition. This is not a problem. This was necessary for survival. But nobody wants to stay hidden behind the shadow. We all want to come out into the light.
So we need true relationships
to be
able to emerge.
Exactly that.
And as teachers, how do you think we can examine the inner world of ourselves?
Yeah.
I think you have already answered that question.
And there's another way of looking at that suffering is a path. We all suffer. We all get angry, we get aggressive, we're passive, we're shy, we're timid, we're manipulative, we're controlling. And if we become conscious of those behaviours, they are the path into what's hidden. And I use that phrase often. Suffering is a path to what's hidden. It is not a pathology.
And when I ask my students why they want to study English, they generally tell me that they have to in order to have a high-paying job, in order to make ends meet in the future. They don't enjoy it.
Yeah.
But I want them to enjoy it, and I want them to. I don't want them to see language as a tool, but rather something that they can really enjoy.
Sure.
How do you think I can achieve this? Or maybe I should stop doing it because you talked about advice today.
Well, I think what's important is to mirror for them what you would like for them to be in terms of learning English, right? So if you show a passion for English and a love of English and the whole creativity of the language and the subtlety of the language, and so students feel inspired by your passion, then it's likely they will find that passion as well. You can't impose it, right? You can't impose your passion on them. It's always good to hold where they're at. And when you ask them that question, how do you feel about studying English? Some will say, I'm only doing it because I have to. And I'd say, and how did that come about? So I listen with them. I draw out, how is it that they don't have a love of the language, right? And once I listen to them, actually then their defences around learning the language may begin to drop. Because listening is the first act of love, right? It is the most important, it is the first communication.
Yes.
And when we listen to somebody, they actually feel heard, they feel seen, and very often the passion for learning that had dropped, right, now begins to come up.
Yeah, you're right, but listening is something that we need to do, definitely.
With ourselves first.
With ourselves, yes,
Yeah.
first. So, but especially for Turkish people, it is difficult because we are very overprotective.
Yeah, and when you overprotect, you disempower.
Yes.
And when you give a lot of advice, you disempower. And when you talk and talk and talk and talk, you disempower. And the most important thing to do when you're with somebody is to listen, not to talk.
Yeah, you're right. But if I don't, for example, take responsibility for my students, then I fear that they are going to fail in the exam, and this will partly be my fault as well.
Well, it's your fear, isn't it? And if you have a fear of failure,
Yes.
well, now you're transferring that onto the students.
Yes.
Your fear of failure belongs to you, and you need to resolve that within yourself, because I'm not what I do. And whether I'm successful or whether I fail, it doesn't either add to my worth nor take from my worth. It's just an experience, right? It's important not to take responsibility for your students, because you spoon feed them then, you do things for them that they need to do for themselves. It is important that you're responsible to your students, and part of that responsibility is to help them to be responsible for themselves, and you encourage and support them to take the responsible actions for themselves, and that's empowering them then. If I take responsibility for a student, I disempower them.
How can I help them take responsibility for themselves?
Well, first of all, by demonstrating responsibility for yourself, because if you have a fear of failure, you're not being responsible for yourself. And they'll pick that up very quickly, right? So, again, it's to be the emergence you want to see. I mean, Gandhi said be the change you want to see, but I prefer the word emergence. Be the emergence you want to see. And that lovely quote by Freud, what a distressing contrast there is between the radiant mind of a child and the feeble-mindedness of the average adult, right? And it's trusting that radiance is always present. And if I want it to be present in my students, it needs to be alive in me. I can't bring it about in students if I've actually hidden it away in myself.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you.